Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you from the freezing city of Montreal, Canada. I'm Frédéric Vogel. I'm joined by my colleague Jessie Monnier and Eric Tamale, and we represent the Convention on Biological Diversity on this call. Thank you for your presence with us today for the 8th installment of the Knowledge Management for Biodiversity initiative. For those of you who've been on this enlightening journey with us since September, you'll recall that we embarked by delving into the world of effective knowledge management. We subsequently explored successful case studies of biodiversity knowledge management at the global, regional, and national levels. Just last week, we had the privilege of hearing from eminent scientists sharing their insights on biodiversity observation networks in the Asia-Pacific and Europe regions, underscoring the significance of stakeholder engagement, needs assessment, and the challenge of bridging the gap between global goals and the national implementation, often hampered by funding constraints and political incentives. For those eager to revisit or catch up on our previous sessions, you can find the summaries and presentations on our website at km4b.cbd.int. We will post this on the chat later so that you can click and access it. Today, we are for a treat as we hear from two influential organizations operating at the national level. Both have been at the forefront of disseminating biodiversity knowledge in their respective countries. The theme of today's presentation is continuous learning through knowledge management, transforming biodiversity management institutions into learning organizations. We have invited our presenters to shed light on how their national institutions in Colombia and Mexico have integrated knowledge management into biodiversity governance. But before we delve into their presentations, please note that the chat and question and answer functions are open to everyone in your application, Zoom application. So feel free to ask questions to our panelists and engage with fellow participants. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Mrs. Maria Cecilia Londono from Colombia. Maria Cecilia is a senior researcher in the Biodiversity Assessment and Monitoring Program at the Humboldt Institute in Colombia, and she also serves as the co-chair of the Group on Earth Observations Biodiversity Observation Networks, GeoBON. Her extensive experience lies in the use of biodiversity geographic analysis for decision-making, including sorry, I had a problem here, including the development of a web platforms for biodiversity data dissemination. She coordinates research that contributes to the implementation of the knowledge to action cycle in the context of biodiversity conservation. Maria Cecilia, and I see here you are joined by Esteban as well, that you can introduce, please. Please, you have the virtual stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure from Humboldt Institute and the National Biodiversity Information System, CIB Colombia, to be here today presenting and giving this presentation. So my colleague, Esteban Marentes, who is part of the CIB Colombia, that is our national GBIF node, is here with me, and we will share this presentation. So we focus on target 21, data, information, and knowledge for decision making available, and we are going to tell you a little bit how Humboldt Institute and CIB Colombia work to make this knowledge and data and information available. So thank you. So the Humboldt Institute is the National Institute of Colombia for Biodiversity, and we host the National Biodiversity Information System. Esteban is going to tell you a little bit more how our information system is organized, but Humboldt is the hosting institution. Next one. Okay, Humboldt was established in 1993, and in its nature is very similar to CONABIO, that is our next presentation. So we are like brother institutes. We are an independent research institute. We are mixed. We receive both money from the government and from the private sector, but we are very linked to the Ministry of Environment. So this is important because for making knowledge available in this political context, these institutional arrangements are needed in the different countries to be established. Our mission is to promote, coordinate, and carry out research that contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in Colombia. So it's a very broad mission, but so I'm going to tell you a little bit how we focus our work in the next 7 years. So Humboldt Institute is part of a national environmental system. Again, the importance of the institutions in the countries. We have different research institutes in the countries. We have INREMAR that is dedicated to the marine biodiversity. We have Instituto Sinchi that operates in the Amazon region. We have the IAP, that is the Institute of the Pacific part of the country. And we have the IDEAM, that is the institution more related to climate and other environmental issues. So we all work in a very coordinated manner under the needs of the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. We will notice that this same arrangement of institutions is the one that is directing the National Biodiversity Information System. So what do? We mobilize data, information, knowledge, and narratives with the aim to position the importance of biodiversity and ecosystem services and to connect biodiversity with its citizens. Obviously, we use the concept of contributions for making biodiversity an essential elements in a transition for a more sustainable society, a society that is based on nature as its core of its economy and sustainable development. So in the core of our team, we have 337 researchers. This is a big team. So also this slide is to show you that these institutions, Colombia is a small, well, medium, small country in size, but very biodiverse. So we do have a lot of work, and we are a team of 300 researchers working on mobilizing data, knowledge, and information systems. So it's a big task, and some statistics you can see here of our scholar levels, ages, and gender. Next one. Okay, so how have we started to work on at Humboldt Institute so that our knowledge, our work, scientific work, research work, the work that we do with the communities is more relevant and more impactful? So we decided to start a mission-oriented agenda. So we established some missions and some outcomes that are really beyond the control of the Institute. So these are like great challenges, big challenges that the country needs to address. Now, once those missions are defined, then and those outcomes that we want to achieve through these missions, we then based or develop some milestones and research and development routes, and those are the ways that we focus our work in those milestones and the research and development routes, so that we can be very clear on how the work of the Humboldt is being impactful to some outcomes and missions that are of the importance of the national level. So I'm going to go very quickly through our 6 missions, just to tell you that we have 3 missions that are more territorial focus, let's say that you can express them in area. And we have other 3 missions that are more enabling. We will see now. So the first mission is conservation of areas of ecological importance. So just making sure that by 2030, we have 50% of the continental areas of ecological importance with effective conservation strategies. This is our first national mission. So Humboldt works with a lot of stakeholders to achieve this mission. The next one, please. The second one is biodiverse productive landscapes. So by 2030, promote that the agricultural, mining, and infrastructure sectors incorporating their business models, the management of biodiversity and ecosystem services. That is the second mission. The third one, please, is resilient urban regional landscapes. So by 2030, the impact of urban regional occupation models is based on the incorporation of biodiversity and resilience elements. That is our third mission. So those 3 are very territorial. And then we have 3 that are enables. So we have one that is bio-based business, so to promote the development of an economy based on biodiversity. We have a social appropriation of knowledge, so increase the social awareness and increase the participation of society in biodiversity and its contributions. And public and sectoral policy, that is the incorporation of biodiversity management in public instruments. So if you see, it's like a mini version of the GBF, but this is how we are working. So the next one, please. So core to all this way of organizing our work is the data management, processing, and information delivery. And that is very cross-cutting to all the work that we do in the milestones, in the routes of work that we have been established. The next one. So we mobilize our knowledge. I'm going to focus a little bit on this more now, the data and information process and management. So we have different tools at the end. So this is like the end products. We have BioTablero, that is a platform where we display, dispose indicators of biodiversity. We have Biomodelos, that is a platform where we disposed the maps of species distributions. And we have the SIP Colombia that Esteban will talk about a little bit more about that. So just a quick example of how we do all this data management and process in these platforms, just responding to all these different missions. So we have a very clear route of using the available data in global repositories and also in our own data repositories and in repositories that are national but are from other parties. We use different technologies to integrate all that data, to process that data, and to display it in different apps or different outcomes. In this case, we are talking about web platforms, but we also do this to produce printed material or other type of outputs to share our data. But we have this like a little industry of data flows, from basic primary data to products and services at the end. We have a dedicated team to work on this. I'm going to just show a little bit more in detail how we work with Biomodelos, that this is the species distribution data. So the next one. So what we have is that, so Biomodelos is the Colombian Atlas for Biodiversity. We have a core team that you see here with that BM sign, and we have a community of experts that is outside Humboldt Institute, where we work together. So we do a planning with these experts, and then we aggregate data that some of them also provide data, or they say that, these are the repositories where I put my data. We have a collaborative cleaning process to assure data quality. We then model the distributions. We go back to the experts. They edit and check the maps. And then we go through ranking of the outputs. And we offer different hypotheses, let's say, of a species, of a map for a single species, but we show how the experts rate them. So some of them have 5 stars, some of them 3. So then you can choose which one you prefer to use. So this is just a very collaborative way, and that is my message in this part of the presentation. We have all this infrastructure ready. We have the experts, the modeling experts, but we are leading and based on the expert contribution and work that the expert community is doing with us. The next one, please. So a big task of all this data mobilization is maintaining those experts communities active. So we have a lot of events when we bring them together, and a lot of incentives, like, for example, publishing the products in peer-review literature, so that they can have more credit of what they are doing. But we have more than 500 experts working with us. The next one. And then at the end, what we have is very detailed distribution maps. So this is the maps of the distribution for an critical endangered monkey. And you can see how we have the records in the map, and in purple, in the end, you can see the map, the distribution. We have some statistics of that distribution and the representative of that distribution in protected areas, and we have some models of forest transformation, and you can have like a quick sense of the status of the habitat of this species with these forest lost models. So basically, this is the core information that we have. We have been using this. For example, we have the hypo distributions, and we have advice about its expansion that is now currently happening. This is now declared an invasive species in Colombia, but part of all this is supported by the work that we have been doing with Biomodelos. The next one. We have also very good information about, for example, what is the impact of illicit crops on biodiversity, because we can do these overlaps with good data of the species distributions. The next one. And obviously, we are using all this information to better plan our 30 by 30 targets, for example. So we see the representation of charismatic or endangered species in our current national protected areas, and then we make some analysis of where do we need to develop the rest of the protected area, of the conservation area, sorry, to accomplish these 30 by 30 targets. So this is the kind of things that we do. The next one, please. So at the end, you can see this is the whole process. So we have to have, the aims of what are we working for. These are the core missions. We have the infrastructure in place, informatic infrastructure, experts in modeling, in data management, in bioinformatics that help us to put all this together. And we have the experts working with us in a community of practice that make all this knowledge available. And then if you click once again, please. But the primary data, the core to make all this happen is these data sources. So that's why now I'm going to introduce you to give the floor to Esteban, who will talk about the SIP Colombia that you can see here in the lower part of the screen. This is a third-party data because you will see it's a big system of institutions of people putting the data of biodiversity together, but from that we then can make all this analysis happen. So Esteban, the floor is yours for you to talk about this part of the CIP Colombia.
Thank you very much, Maria Cecilia. So my name is Esteban Marentes. I'm a data administrator at CIP Colombia, Biodiversity Information System of Colombia. And I want to share our experience in data management and governance. So first, a little bit of history about CIP Colombia. We are the national network of organizations, people, and initiatives that whose main purpose is to share free open access biodiversity data. We were created by law in 1994, and we are hosted by the Humboldt Institute. We are also part of several networks, national networks like SIAC, Environmental Information System of Colombia, and we are also the official node from 2001. The main goal of CIP Colombia is to facilitate gestion, publishing, data use for super research, education, policy, and decisions to build a more sustainable society. I want to share a little bit about our governance. So CIP Colombia, being a national system, is hosted by the Humboldt Institute, but is not governed just by the Humboldt Institute. We have a directive and technical committees that composed by the 5 main research institutes that Maria Cecilia talked about earlier: Humboldt, INVEMAR, SINCHI, IAP, IDEAM, but we also have a representative of academia, Universidad Nacional, the national area, protected areas, and the environmental minister. So all these institutions in the directive and technical committees gave the main guidelines to CIP Colombia. CIP Colombia have a technical secretary that is hosted by the Humboldt Institute that is responsible for the day-to-day operations. But we are not just these institutions. We are a network. And as a network, we have more than 200 publishers that share their access in a voluntary way. These publishers abide by CIP Colombia principles of open access, non-profit, cooperation, shared responsibility. And I want to talk a little bit more about these different publishing partners and or sectors. We have publishing partners from several sectors: universities, research institutes, environmental authorities, NGOs, business sector, thematic expert networks, and citizen science initiatives. All these publishing partners have the main goal of share biodiversity data, but sometimes they have a little bit different goals in mind. For example, universities are more focused on academic publishing and fulfilling legal obligations, but business sector is interested in highlight their works in biodiversity conservation. So we try to engage with these different communities using different tones and to provide a whole set of services to fulfill their needs. To end with the governance, CIP Colombia works as a network of networks. We try to connect these different institutions at the national level, also at international level. When a publishing institution shares the data through CIP Colombia, it gets indexed also in GBIF and OBIS. So we made these links to improve their use and impact of biodiversity data. I want to continue with data management. CIP Colombia abides by the FAIR principles. So all data that is published through CIP Colombia is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Findable because this data is available at the national and international portals. Accessible because everyone can go see this data, download this data without any special requirements. Is interoperable because we use international standards like Darwin Core and Plinian Core, and it's reusable because it can be used for different purposes that this data was originally gathered. But how how do we to help with management biodiversity data? We do it by publishing this data. Some of our organizations are more focused on data gathering and organizing their data. They usually go to the field, take some data, organize, and sometimes they publish the data, but after being analyzed in a paper, but the raw data is not published. This raw data is really important because it can be used for another person to another purpose, but it have a greater value and impact if you publish it and made it available. To do this, we help our publishers to standardize the data in Darwin Core and Plinian Core and host some IPTs to help these people publish the data. That way, institutions have a greater impact in both ways. First, they are sharing the data to a greater community, and also standardize and publish the data help this institution internally, because now this data is in a stable repository accessible to everyone and is no longer in the computer of a personal investigator that can get lost. How does Colombia help institutions? Well, we have a dedicated help desk to guide and answer questions about the whole process, to organize, standardize, and publish data. We also have capacity development programs to teach publishers how to publish and use biodiversity data. We have online programs and also have presential programs for interested institutions. And finally, it's really important that we enhance visibility, recognition, and attribution. When a publisher shares the data through Colombia, they retain the rights to this data and they can get benefit from it. So they have a data set that can be cited by a DOI. They have also a publisher page when people can see how many data sets they have published, how many sites do they have, how many records, so they can visibilize their efforts. I want to share highlights on our early experience publishing data of local communities. So this year we published our first data set of a resguardo indígena, that is an indigenous land owned and managed by indigenous people. And I want to share a little bit about our experience. So when you work with these communities, you have to think about another things that you usually don't think when you are working with other communities like business sectors or the government. First, you have to take the care principles in mind. So you give attribution, you give the ethical, you have ethics in mind. Also, and really important is to learn from these local communities. Sometimes when we publish data, we are more focused on fit everything in a single standard. But these communities have another uses on mind, or have another ways of understand this data. So they are more interested in, for example, the uses that you have to biodiversity. So we are working to also be able to put these uses in our platform so people can get access to it. And finally, when you work with these communities, you have to have in mind that they have different workflows and times. They have their own governance that you have to take in account, and you cannot expect they do everything at the same speed that other organizations. If you want to know more about Colombia, you can visit our website at biodiversidad.com.
Thank you, Esteban. So just 4 or 5 final messages from this presentation. So the knowledge co-production is really needed to be guided by big targets or missions that have big impact, so that you know why you are gathering this data for. And well, we do have that in our 23 targets of the GBF right now. So I think that every country, and reducing this, or putting this into the national context through the NBSAP process, is that mission-oriented national impact that you need to have in your mind. Now, knowledge mobilizations depends on adequate data management processes and information delivery. You need to have clear the way that you are going to organize this path from the raw data to the final knowledge that you are going to deliver or put in an available way, and that is something very important that you have to have organized and defined. Information products must be developed by active knowledge networks. So it's important, obviously, to make this in a co-constructive way. Biodiversity information systems provide the primary data for the production of information and knowledge products. You have to have, this information system for records, and in this case, GBIF provides a very good support for all the countries that want to develop the biodiversity information systems. And while making data and information available do not only depends on the information infrastructure, but on the network of people that share and build the knowledge together. And that is our core message that we want to deliver in this presentation. Thank you for your attention, and we are open to hear the questions.
Thank you very much, Esteban and Maria Cecilia, for your presentation today. And sorry if your name was not appearing, Esteban. We will correct this in our summary that we put on our website. It's amazing how far you went from the beginning of the presentations that we had in this KM seminar. I'm always amazed how far some countries and now Colombia have gone in this process. And I thank you very much for sharing this invaluable experience with us. I encourage, as Maria Cecilia was saying, participants to submit their questions for the team or in Colombia by using the Q&A feature that is in Zoom. And I've seen a few greetings already, but no questions so far. So please do not hesitate to use the system, either the chat or the Q&A function, to ask your questions to Colombia and the team over there. Now, let me introduce our second presenter, Mr. Hesiquio Benitez Diaz. Mr. Benitez serves as the General Director of International Cooperation and Implementation at CONABIO. Many of us at the CBD and in this forum recognize him as the former chair of SUBSTA, a role he held with distinction from 2018 until just a couple of weeks ago. He's a renowned botanist recognized for his contribution to the study and conservation of Mexico's plant diversity. Mr. Benitez has played a pivotal role in establishing CONABIO as a centralized hub, aggregating Mexican biodiversity data from various sources, curating it, and disseminating integrated knowledge to facilitate informed, evidence-based decision-making. Let's now learn more about CONABIO's experience in integrating knowledge management into biodiversity governance. Hesiquio, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see the screen properly.
Yes.
Excellent. And thank you very much for the invitation, and nice to see Maria Cecilia again. And as she said, CONABIO and Humboldt are sisters or brothers or sisters institutions for quite a long time, with the same profile in terms that are governmental institutions with a long history on information on biodiversity, in particular developments of what we call bioinformatics, and the challenge to use this information in an applicable way by different stakeholders. So I will try to explain a long story in a short way, and for this webinar, starting that as Colombia, we are mega diverse countries with big challenges about to know and to appreciate and to find ways to, the best way to use and conserve our natural capital. It's very diverse in ecosystems, in species, in languages. So it's a mixture of natural assets, but also biocultural elements. Mexico is also a center of domestication of many plants cultivated worldwide, like maize and pumpkins and chilies and beans and a huge number. But what is important is not only to say we have a lot, to know them, to understand the distribution, to understand the capacities, to see in the face of new developments that are trying to homogenize ecosystems worldwide, how we can take advantage of this variety and how to maintain this variety and also the linkages with many cultural values of our ancestral indigenous peoples. So CONABIO was created in '92, just before the Rio Summit. And part of the mandate of CONABIO is to gather, to generate, and to synthesize information on Mexico's biodiversity. How it works with the support of scientists in the country and other places in the planet, with the most latest and reliable information on many topics and from diverse regions. We act as a bridge between the academia, the government, and the civil society. And this is not easy, but it's a story that in 3 decades, we are learning how to do it best, because we cannot speak using Latin languages, neither to any community or any politician, but how to be precise, concrete, to send the right message, hoping that good decisions are taken, in understanding that well-informed people will take better decisions, and our role is to provide this information. So we work on these matters. The first duty is to establish a national biodiversity information systems, but we look beyond in terms to develop intelligence as the capacity to solve problems using the best information. So we generate information for sustainable use, which implies limits on how to get the information and the methodologies to establish safe limits for harvesting, for example. So this is part of the core part of sustainable use. But it's important to know the distribution of endangered species, alien species for commercial use, and also to help to determine in the best way priority areas for conservation and also now for restoration in order to present the most of our biodiversity. So to identify priorities at terrestrial, marine, fresh waters levels, and to work at national level with the strategies when we use information into policy for international cooperation to follow up CBD, but also CITES convention, but also the IPBS, and also to work from the national level to regional or state level by gathering also information with a different scale, more appropriate for local implementation. So we've been working with the different states in Mexico for a number of years. In addition to the use of new technologies, by monitoring, for example, wildfires, land use change, different mapping distribution of species, as Cecilia shows, oceans, mangroves, important ecosystems. So after 30 years, we have thousands, like 500,000 of satellite images that is accessible to our website. The National Biodiversity Information has about 13 million records of plants and animals, also information on medicinal, ornamental, spiritual information, biological and cultural biodiversity. So there's a lot of information at the 3 levels of biodiversity: ecosystem, species, and a genetic level, giving a priority to agrobiodiversity. As I said, Mexico is also a center for domestication. So with this information, we are transiting from data alone to turn this into information to make sense, and to turn this into knowledge, and to use this knowledge as part of this intelligence to solve issues to do things better, and that this information, the challenge is how this information can be accessible to all people in the country. So we consider our main users, the academy, the decision makers, which can be the president, a governor, a minister, but also a fisher, a forester, and a ranger. They are taking decisions every day because they live next to biodiversity and they are impacting for good or bad our biodiversity. So it's very important to send this information based on information. We started many years ago with information from museums and herbarium, systematizing the information, repatriating the information. We don't want the specimens back to Mexico that are hosted during centuries in other countries, but the information is so essential to create and to do modeling about distribution of these species with new information now from social networks, civil society that is also participating through citizen science. Also, we finance during years projects in the field, and we have almost 40 million records of information from specimens. So that is the backbone of information of our system. This is being subject to quality information controls, to georeference in more than 1 million places for these 40 million records that are accessible through different platforms to give an added value to this data. When we look to the Montreal framework, we can see like 4 main goals that goes for conservation, to promote sustainable use, to safeguard our natural capital, and to act in a more integrated way by mainstreaming. I'm going to give you some examples of these subsets of targets, starting with the ones more focused on conservation, on spatial planning, restoration, conservation, and to hold human-induced extinction at species level. So information like remote sensing is quite important to have an overview of what's happening from above, using along the time different types of information and satellites on the HVRR with the 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers to very few meters, even now centimeters of precision. So this information, to contrast the information from the field and information that we have from other sources, makes a lot of sense. So we have to establish a different monitoring programs on ecosystems levels, like the mangrove monitoring system in 2005, the wetlands monitoring system 2015, land coverage and vegetation monitoring systems in 2000, the cloud forest monitoring, which is a very special type of forest and difficult to measure because there are clouds usually. So use the technology to pass through the clouds to see how remaining cloud forest still is quite important, and to then look for bioconnectivities, time series analysis of this information, early warning programs like forest fires, satellite image reception system to process fast this information, and also heat islands recently. So it's a number of applications that are there, but this goes accompanied to information and also incidents in policies. So quickly, you can see in this timeline, since the creation of CONABIO, we participated in the first country study. We aligned to 2010 targets, or the program of work on protected areas, studies on gap analysis to perfectionate or to complement our system of protected areas based on information. So if there are more resources, we know where and when to have a better representation of the most important ecosystems in our country. We did the second ecosystem assessment, which is the second country study with more than 800 scientists participating. The alignment to IHG targets, SDGs, now working on bioclimatic corridors, and recently working in the National Environmental Restoration and Information Systems. So this, you can see this evolution in the use of information to also address UNCCD targets and the 2030 agenda, and also to support through policy tools like the national biodiversity strategies, and also some specifics like pollinators, plants, and also the biofilm work to identify how much costs to implement the convention based on the information we have and the capacities we have to implement successfully the objectives of the convention in this case. The challenge is to permeate all this information into the national development plans or state level programs for development. And part of this also goes into the line of what we call the mainstreaming. How, instead of fight, to work together with the different productive sectors that get benefits from biodiversity, and we need to zoom and to act as a team. So how this information can be used for moving now into mainstreaming at different levels, at sectorial level, at the state level. So it's not enough to work only at national level because it's a big picture. But when we go down and we work with the different states in Mexico, this has been a very amazing work. With 30 of the 32 provinces in our country, we published already 25 studies on biodiversity with an average of 200 authors each, and also 18 biodiversity strategies and action plans, and also the creation of 4 institutions like CONABIO, but at state level. So they can have the information on the scale needed for effective implementation. When we move to target 1, we can also provide tools that the National Information System on seas and coastal areas, with information from satellites, with sampling in situ, modeling, geospatial models, and this is an open access tool to address all these elements. For restoration, we are working on this. It's been also a process on the information to identify, to have clarity of the concepts, to identify the places for modeling, and to work on this. The launch will be soon in Mexico in next November, with a more robust system with easy accessibility. While trying to see 30 by 30 target, we also work with what we call an honest assessment of the different states in Mexico about what we call the natural capital. This means how much remaining nature in good shape still, and also in comparison with predators and also with prey, to see how healthy are the ecosystems, because it's not only the easy way to measure polygons of protected areas that are just in the paper. With the use of these technologies, we can reduce or to eliminate degraded areas and to see really how much ecosystems in good shape still in the country, in or outside protected areas. And based on this, we made this analysis province by province in Mexico to have an assessment where are the states with more critical situation, or you can take a number of assumptions and decisions based on this type of information. So we keep working in more details to have that robust background using different taxonomical groups, different elements in the ecosystems to assess the quality and the potential, and how this can maintain ecosystem services, which are essential for human well-being and also for other species that share with us this planet. On recovery of species, we also work on information on basic knowledge from taxonomy, distribution, ecology, assessment of populations. The monitoring is very different to descriptions. So we need time, we need standardized protocols, and to analyze trends, and to use this information to generate also information sheets that can be useful for decision makers, on recovering also tools for the species by species, analyzing the information. And as I said, with tools like eBird or citizen science, we can combine information from centuries in museums to today's information, people taking photographs, and with all the information, once they pass quality controls, can be used to zoom to the amount of information we have available to monitor migratory birds, to monitor endangered species, and to act properly. When we move to the different goals related to stop unsustainable use, to reduce alien species, to reduce pollution, to reduce climate change, we also have information in terms that, for example, implementing CITES, which is related to international trade of endangered species. We've been working since 2000, so we work to produce amendment proposals to have the species in the right level of the appendices of CITES. We work on periodic reviews with the different experts to assess if they are in the right place. To analyze significant trade when we assume that there is some overexploitation of a species, on how to establish non-detriment findings, how much is enough to have a safe quota. So we work on that with the non-detriment findings and number of species. We're working and issuing these documents and technical opinions, and work with different scientists to be sure that harvesting and export of these species are safe in terms of sustainability. When we work on alien species, alien invasive species, it was a recent topic in SOBSTA and also by IPES with the global assessment, one of the major processes of biodiversity loss, to transit for the identification of 2,600 species in Mexico, to elaborate the potential distribution maps. We have more than 500,000 records of presence of alien species, and to identify introduction routes, to generate materials, but together with an evolution of a strategy, or even to publish official listings to identify these species, and also to get projects to mobilize all this information and policies and measures to be taken by authorities regarding invasive species. Climate change, big issue, but the modeling, the information to assess the impacts, and to interactive explorer platform is also part of the work we do in CONABIO. So we process early files, 10 images per day at national level. We process this in 20 minutes, and also we cover Central American countries. We have open access to our information as a platform. And also when we go to targets 9 to 13 to manage, because sustainable use has two fronts. The defensive, to avoid the exploitation, but how to do properly and the proactive to be sustainable and to get benefits, in particular for indigenous peoples and local communities. When we can say these are good practices. So we need materials, we need manuals for identification, for monitoring species. We've been working with this for species like crocodiles, like tarantulas, for timber, for candelilla, which is also an important export. So we need this information to be sure that we're taking good decisions. Agrobiodiversity, as I said, is a very important element in Mexico, particularly with maize. And as you can see in the lower right part, Mexicans do not eat the same to the country. We are a mega diverse country. We have many species, one of the most largest cuisines in the planet. And this is part of this diversity. How to maintain in the long term these varieties that to keep providing wellness for the people. To avoid this uniformization of foods and mega plantations of a single species in detriment of the diversity and also medicinal plants and many other things that are associated to places that, like in Mexico, the milpa is a very rich agroecosystem with lots of species that are part of our cultural reality. Restoration also, we have more powerful tools to identify key areas where it's urgent to start actions on restorations to these systems, and also now is more needed to work with urban environments. The implementation of the Singapore Index on Citrus and Biodiversity is also part of the things that we are very happy to see. Some national initiatives like EON getting funding, moving on urban biodiversity, for example, in Toluca, in Mexico States, or in Guanajuato, developing indexed on by the urban biodiversity, by their own, or working together many provinces on these matters and being more active in CBD parts. Mainstreaming means to work together with the different productive sectors that depends on biodiversity. This was the slogan for the COP13 in Mexico, mainstreaming biodiversity for well-being, and it was the first time when we brought ministers of agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and tourism to talk about what they are doing for maintaining biodiversity in good shape and to keep being an essential base for this productive sector. So we need also to learn the language of other sectors and to get back to those data from museums using these new technologies to better advise our ministers of these things. Incentives, we're also working using these bioinformatic tools by mapping production areas with protected areas to avoid overlapping of incentives or to make a better use of these incentives and to have warning systems to say this is an overlapping that goes like if you're driving a car, it's like pressing the gas pedal, but also the brakes. This is not good. And unfortunately, this is happening in many countries. But to have this information in a visual way, in a platform where you can see different layers can also help you to take better decisions on incentives, on subsidies, for example. So moving from multilateral, regional, and bilateral, it's been a long task for these 3 decades in CONABIO. And as I said, working as translators and interpreters on this science policy interface for implementation of these international commitments is also a big duty in CONABIO. To be able to openly talk to indigenous peoples and local communities in the right level with the right information to the governments, to the academy, to the NGOs, and also to the private sector. This is key to use adequately this information. This is being recognized, fortunately, by CBD, for example, getting CHM awards. And I invite you to visit the webpage of CONABIO when we have tons of information and different platforms where you can move through different scales and levels. And also, there's a lot of materials because also awareness is very important with the precise information to different users. So I invite you to take a look on these tools of citizen science. And a long story, more or less short, I guess, on how we can transit on this evolution of information on biodiversity for conservation and sustainable use. Thank you very much.
Another presentation that was very interesting and an eye-opener to me. We are here in CBD, we work on the policies, but when we see that things are happening on the ground, we are very proud for you and very happy as well. So thank you for providing us with this insight in your extensive experience in this field. We now have approximately 30 minutes to address the questions that you or our participants have raised online. I haven't seen so much. I was told last time not to read them out, but maybe I've seen a few that have been answered already or not. How would you like to proceed, Ari, here?
We can ask the I think Maria Cecilia and
Okay.
She can explain some
Okay.
of what she has said.
So Maria Cecilia, if you want to start on the answers, that because I have not seen the answers yet, that you have the questions and answers that were asked to you in the beginning by Ivan Conesa Alcolea. Please, Maria Cecilia, you have the floor.
Okay, I was just typing the last answer. So maybe I will start from the one that I haven't answered yet.
Okay.
And in that sense also I think Hesiquio has a lot to say here too. And hello Hesiquio, I'm sorry I didn't say hello to you at the beginning, but I was having problems with my audio and my video and I was a little bit worried. But it's also very nice to see you again. So the question is, how do Colombia and Mexico conduct knowledge management for biodiversity at regional and transborder scales? For example, endangered, invasive, and commercially harvested species. So that coordination between countries, coordination between research agendas, coordination between decisions is a little bit challenging, because, well, at Humboldt Institute is more, let's say that we have more more experience in coordinating our research activities with other countries. So, for example, we have had many times work with, for example, SANBI or CONABIO to coordinate the research that we make in endangered species. But then when we take those results to making decisions, you need to go through the government to take those decisions, and there is where all these international networks are really helpful, and the multilateral agreements to make those coordinated decisions there. So basically, that is like the answer I was giving, is that you need to coordinate all the work in different levels, let's say. So one is the research agenda, but the other is more the decision-making agenda. But at the same time, the research and the decision-making needs to also coordinate a little bit more. So it's important that the researchers participate in this negotiation process and decision-making process. I don't know, that is like my quick answer to this question, but Hesiquio, maybe you can complement that question.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, certainly there's a big room of opportunity for collaborating at regional level. Some of the examples that we have are that there are bodies that look for cooperation, that the Commission, the Central American CCAD, Central American Cooperation and Development area, the Commission for Environmental Cooperation in North America, where we met frequently with US and Canada, working on birds, the Trilateral Committee on Wildlife and Environment. We have working tables for migratory species, for alien species, for ecosystems that are shared, where we get together with the agencies of protected areas and wildlife and to see common agendas. This is one way. Or, for example, the development of protocols that monitor for crocodiles for Belize and Guatemala and Mexico, and also efforts like Selma Maya, where we do monitoring on biodiversity. Or recently, we had this meeting also with our colleagues in Colombia for jaguars, to have a common strategy for conservation and to stop illegal killing of jaguars, where the countries share information. But we were looking for transboundary opportunities for corridors and connectivities to working together on this transboundary ecosystems for the conservation of the species, or the platforms that I said we have for showing fires, where we personalize all Central American countries and even south part of the US, so we can monitor with very precision when fire starts, with additional information, if it's an agricultural land, or if it's a forest or pine forest or cloud forest, and also identify if there are endangered species that can help to prioritize the scarce resources that we usually have to address. When you have 4 or 5 fires at the same time, this information can help you where to go first in terms of priority for conservation or other different criteria. So using these tools and also people connections, and to have joint agendas on bilateral meetings, or using the platforms that we have, is a way to use this information and to work together. Thank you.
You for your answers. There is this other question on private sector that you have answered already, but I'm asking you if you can answer it live so that the recording has it as well. So I'll give the floor to Maria Cecilia and read it quickly. To what extent those information and services are actually used by private sector, other sectorial ministries, and regionally, same questions, yeah.
Yeah, so we have already engaged the business sector, for example, in the publishing of their biodiversity data through the CIP Colombia. And now we are working very close with them to use them, for example, in the TNFD framework. They traditionally use this information in licensing, but not all the business in Colombia are licensed. So many of those do not use it, let's say, in a regular basis. So what we do really is that we work with the National Agency of Business, and in that sense, the National Agency of Business has a water and biodiversity center, and through them we just work with the different business to promote the use of biodiversity data in a lot of the needs that they have, from their own plans to the disclosures to the legal regulations, and that is how we do it. So I think every time it's more common for private sectors to be engaged in this process of data management and use of data of biodiversity, but there is still a way to go, and it depends a lot on us to show how is the correct way and how is this information useful for them.
Thank
At
you.
least that is.
Yeah. Hesiquio, from your end and private sector connections.
Thank you very much. As Maria Cecilia said, still a lot to be done yet. Of course, there is more and more interest from the private sector to engage on this. But in one hand, we need to see how to avoid greenwashing. And on the other hand, how to get an honest participation, an injection of energy and funding to address many issues that government sector cannot address. And of course, there's a resistance of business as usual. I remember during COP13, we opened a very nice business forum where many enterprises expressed their views. And now for the new framework, we need a more active and more responsible participation from the private sector. So there are some elements like certification processes or disclosures, but definitely we need more engagement. And I believe this is an area of opportunities to invest in new businesses on biodiversity. We cannot continue with the same. And considering the diversity in places, the diversity in species, in the regions and the uses, I see a lot of opportunities if this is done in a responsible way. And also, as I said, avoiding greenwashing, but moving from the business as usual to something more integral, better informed on this. And so still a lot to be done. I wish I can give more examples, but this is something that is needed, and I believe we have more and more elements for a good accompaniment to these future ventures. Thank you.
Esteban, would you like to add on this?
Yes, I want to share a little bit about the experience from CIP Colombia. From a little bit of anecdotal, most of these business sector that do environmental impact assessment cites the data from CIP Colombia. So you usually see in the baseline, like from this county, these species are by CIP Colombia. So we are widely used. I say anecdotal because usually these sites aren't using a DOI or are not easily followed. you cannot easily trace this data use, but it's used. When you open an environmental impact assessment, is really likely that you're going to see Colombia being cited. But as Cecilia said, it's just for these specific baselines. Usually, we have more services at Colombia, and we are working with the business sector, so they're going to use more of this data and not just baselines.
So what? Oh,
If I can add something, I believe that of course there's a big effort not only to reduce the footprint from the private sector, because that's part of the maybe reactive approach, but on the proactive one is where the new opportunities and the new businesses. And I believe, and I'm sorry for putting this spot Humboldt, but you have a very nice experience with the petrol industry, for example. I mean, even if it's this is a mixture between sectors and private sector, but productive sectors has a lot to do in energy production of food and petrol and so on. And I hope Humboldt can share a little bit of this very good experience with the petrol sector in Colombia.
Yes. So Hesiquio, we and everyone, we have been working with the national oil company that is called Ecopetrol. And we have been working with them for more than 10 years. So it's really a long-term collaboration. And we started with baselines, for example, and then now we are working with them after 10 years in the establishing of protected areas that are owned by the petrol industry, let's say, but they want to set those places just for conservation and to work with the communities for biodiversity-based business. So we are doing bioprospections with the communities and with them. So it's have been like an evolution of the use of biodiversity data through these 10 years. But just to mention that it's a long-term relationship, and you need to start to building trust to find the correct people in the business, so that they really understand the importance of this. The will of the industry, obviously, to make this is very important, and the openness of the researchers that work from the biodiversity part, because sometimes the researchers are, oh well, this is an oil company, I will not work with them, they are the bad guys, they are the bad ones. But then if you don't work with them and start to show them other possibilities and how to make their work in a better way, well, this task is not going to be accomplished, never ever. So that is the way we work, a little bit of our experience on that.
That's what I believe is very important, this bridge role of institutions, of biodiversity-related institutions, to be the contact with the different stakeholders at local level, with the government, with the industry, with the academy, and also to create trust, as you said, I believe is key.
Yeah, now I wanted to call, I think, some compliment on what you've just said, and both of you, and the point I think here that Hesiquio raised, that being proactive and engaging. I think the tendency in the past was for many of the research institutions around the world having this data collected, published, and that's where it ends. And if you don't reach out, well, to the regulatory authorities, the public sector, but also to the private sector that might be the beneficiaries of the data and the information that you collect, to improve their decision making, to improve their operations, to improve. that's at the end of the day, that's what we're working towards. So I think the key word for me was this proactive engagement and making sure that whatever information data that you collect, and of course distilling it to the level of knowledge that the policymakers and others can comprehend, I think is key, and we should all be working towards that.
Mhm.
Esteban, please.
Yeah, I want to add that from CIP Colombia, being the biodiversity information system, a national system, we can engage with the business sector in a more like neutral way. You know, we are helped to publish all sectors, and we treat everyone equally, from business sector, academia, government. So people come to us and we help them publish. So that way, when we help, I don't know, Ecopetrol, Cerrejón, that are these big companies from fossil fuels publish, we don't have a conflict of interest. We are just helping them. We are not greenwashing anyone. No? We are just a platform to publish their data. We are not creating data out of thin air from those organizations. No. They come to us, they say, I have this data. We help them publish this data. That's all. But we are also engaged with them, as Maria Cecilia said. You need to engage this sector to say, hey, if you publish your data, you can have benefits for yourself and for the wider community. You're going to be more visible on what you do. Because sometimes these companies not only they have big programs of conservation or just these big environmental impact assessments or monitoring that can be useful not for them but for a wider community.
Maria Cecilia, and then Hesiquio, please.
Yeah, so two tips that I think we have been learning. So the first one, when you work with the business sector, they like competition. So for example, when trying to move them to mobilize their data and publish their data, CIP Colombia has some strategies of like the company with the most, the best data available, and they rank it. And then the company that is number 2 or 3 call CIP Colombia. Now I want to be number 1. What do I need to do? So they like the competition is like in their veins. So we have to make a use of that. And then the other issue is that it also was, let's say, all this mobilization of data and use of data from the business sector is part a result of the legislation process and of regulatory instruments that demands that all the business that use species needs to publish the data, or biodiversity needs to publish the data in national repositories. So that is also something that is there in the legislation and forces companies to do this.
My turn. I remember years ago also Humboldt had a very nice initiative that they called business incubators or something like that many years ago. That's a very interesting approach, but here comes the term of value chains, which is very important to ensure fair, legal, sustainable, and traceable trade. For example, when we link this to CITES species or endangered species, how to move from the illegal trade to legal trade? What conditions are necessary to work with the communities, with the academy, and to identify the weakness points of these value chains? How to change from a poacher's situation or an informal economy to a formal economy that can supply the demand. We always complain about there's people taking out the birds, taking out the seahorses or sea cucumbers or going to other continents. And why instead of complain, we don't get ready to cover that demand from legal sources to invest and to work with the community, to work with the governments, with investment on the private sector for healthy value chains to address properly this demand, because there is a market there in biodiversity. And if we don't address properly, we're going to continue eroding our natural resources. So if we are proactive and we put the stakeholders together and we use the best technologies and information, we can make a turn for good businesses in the future using our natural capital in a more sustainable way and moving from the illegal economies to formal economies, and also taking care of the fairness of this, because at the very end of the value chain is the people that is not even related to communities and getting a lot of profits, and the community is getting very little from the resources. So I think these are areas of opportunity where we can work, because conservation has a cost, and sustainable use can be part of this. Without sustainable use, it's almost impossible to do conservation. So how to enable better conditions for indigenous peoples and local communities? We need to provide information for a better establishment that can ensure that the use of biodiversity is more sustainable and fair for everyone. So it's a big challenge there. Thank you.
I hear and see Maria Cecilia answering to this next question that I wanted to pick up on. What indicators do you use to measure progress and success in private sector engagement? So what are the indicators there? Maria Cecilia, please.
Yes, so, well, in fact, we really do not have indicators for engagement. And I will, maybe Esteban can answer this question more correct that I have, but we just have numbers of records published by the different countries, a number of people that have been in the process of capacity building, like how many professionals from the different countries are engaged in the capacity building programs. But that is what we really have. We haven't thought about that. So it's a really good question. Esteban, do you want to complement?
Yeah, we don't have like indicators. We follow the numbers of publishers that have been increasing through the years, number of data sets, number of records, number of sites of these data sets, but we don't have like an indicator to the private sector to say, okay, this year we were successful with the private sector because we calculated this. No, we just see with the past years, like in 2020, we have, I don't know, 10 business sectors publishing, and now we have like 40. So it's been an increase, a big increase for us, but it's not that indicator properly speaking.
Thanks for the good question. We have another question here from Saroja Barik, or Saroya Barik. And it reminds me that out there, there will be question and scientific question like this one, very specific, that, for example, Colombia would have the answer, and maybe somebody in Angola or another place would like to know. But here is the question: is there technology to recover native species for a dried aquatic ecosystem? So yeah, where could this person find this information? Maybe you don't have the answer now in this webinar, but where would they find this answer? In Colombia and in Mexico?
Wow,
Yes,
it's a hard question because I'm not a specialist on dried ecosystems. But well, we have had a lot of research on wetlands that are part of tropical dried systems. And there have been management plans, and more than management plans, are like community-based programs, like with local community to recover the wetland ecosystems in these dry tropical ecosystems within. So there are some reference to that efforts, but it's more like the recovery of the ecosystems. I really have in mind one like a focal species, and that is like what we have done. At least I will try to look at some of the sources or the specialist, and I can direct the person to them. But yes, I do not have the answer. I think we do have the we have the technology. That is a hard question.
But how?
I don't know if we have the technology to recover, depending on the stage of endanger that is that species, we might be able to recover it or not.
Yeah, but if somebody in Colombia or somebody external is interested in to find this information, where would they search for in your systems?
Okay, so we have a data repository. Well, basically we have our webpage where you can you search the different research lines that there are at Humboldt, but we do have a data repository where all the products of the Humboldt are published. I will put the link there and you can search for it, but I think it's only in Spanish.
The
yes.
language
Yeah.
issue.
Mm-hmm.
Hesiquio, would you like to answer this specific question? Very specific.
Well, certainly this is very specific, but I believe I need to take a look, or I invite you to look for the publications we have in CONABIO, because we have published at least 2 books on different experiences of restoration in Mexico, covering different habitat from forest to the sea, rivers, and so on. So probably it could be some experiences that can be interesting for you in this particular, because you mentioned dry aquatic ecosystems. It may be something there, and surely will be more experiences in other places. But I wanted to go back a little bit on what Maria Cecilia was talking about, and Esteban on indicators. Maria Cecilia is the co-chair of the indicators expert group for the framework, and they already provide for Substa a list of binary indicators that can give us an idea if we are in the right place or not. But there's still a lot to be done on the methodologies for headline indicators, component and complementary. But what I want to say is that technology is useful. Technology can help you to know things and to do things better, but this will not replace that we need a behavioral change. And this is also very important. And also to be more inclusive in the participation while taking decisions. So this is a good indicator as well in how many cases indigenous peoples and local communities or women or youth are actively participating in decisions. This is very key. And I believe it's up to us to show this and to give confidence if we are in the right track when it's more participatory. And if you look on the publications section of CONABIO, I will look for the link you probably can find, going back to the restoration question, with some experiences that may be useful, because restoration is case by case. So you need to analyze the context, the habitat, and the drivers, and the stakeholders to have a successful strategy for restoration. Thank you.
We are nearing the end of this webinar. So thank you for the questions that people have asked, and thank you both, the three of you, for your answers. So the next webinar is scheduled for November the 7th. We are in the process of confirming who will be the speakers, but we will share this information with the registered participants shortly. This will be the 9th webinar in this series, leading up to a brief hiatus during the meeting of Article 8J that will happen in Geneva, Switzerland, from the 12th of November to the 16th of November. Eri, you wanted to give some final remarks?
No, just to thank you, Hesiquio and Maria Cecilia. This has been very informative, and I think you've set a gold standard in this area, and we look forward to learning more from you. And we encourage other institutions, for those of you who are still online, if you have similar examples from your countries and you would like to share, please let us know, and we can create opportunities for you to share with the whole world. This is very, very helpful, and for those at least that are struggling to become a Humboldt or a CONABIO. And our vision is by 2030 we should have a CONABIO, a Humboldt in every country, and this would move us to the next stage of actually taking decisions based on evidence, based on information that is well researched. And I would love to see that vision happen in my lifetime when I'm still with the CBD. So please, let's join hands and continue working together. And I'm sure we can achieve this vision. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eri. So dear participants, this marks the conclusion of today's Knowledge Management for Biodiversity webinar. We appreciate your active participation, your insightful questions, and we wish you all a productive and enjoyable week. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Adios.
Thank you.